brutal storms, lethal floods, rushing landslides, all of this has devastated many parts of Europe over the past few weeks. Slovenia was one of them. From these images, you might have expected hundreds of people to die, but actually it was only 6. In comparison, in Germany in 2021, 184 people died after floods surged through the Ahrtal Valley. So in Slovenia, where hundreds of houses were destroyed, thousands more flooded, and 2/3 of the entire country was hit, how did rescue teams manage to save people so quickly? And when disaster strikes, what dictates how many people die and how many can be saved? In this video, we will find out how Slovenia recorded so few deaths in the worst natural disaster in the history of the country. And we'll see what other countries could do differently when disaster hits. Let's start by zooming in on one of the regions hit worst by the floods. What was that like for people when water started coursing through the villages, destroying roads and cutting off their running water and power? We went to ask some of them.
Jaz sem čez okno ven videla, ko je reka drla mimo hiše. Hiša je ostala suha, hvala Bogu. Prvi dan jaz nisem sploh pomislila, kaj je z gostilno, pa tako da sam da je doma vse v redu, pa pri mojih starših, pa pri sosedih.
We were affected by the floods that we did not have running water, not anything else.
Zdaj imam vsakič strah pred kakšnim deživjem, da bo kar zdaj spet tako, kot je bilo, ali pa ja, no, ne počutim se glih najbolj prijetno. Pa pol spremljam napovedi, mislim.
Reakcija po celi Sloveniji, ko so bile poplave, jasno, je bil šok, ne? Tudi pri nam, ampak smo se hitro lotili in kot vidite, resort obratuje, kot da se ne bi nič zgodilo.
The people we spoke to seemed to react quite pragmatically, even though the loss of life could have been much more extreme. Like it was the case of Ahrtal in West Germany, where, as we mentioned before, almost 200 people died. There were accusations that warnings were not passed on, and one expert described the response as a complete system failure. So how come Slovenia managed to do it better? To understand how this could happen, I spoke to experts and a young volunteer from a rescue team. They told me about 3 main reasons for which Slovenia was well placed to handle this monumental catastrophe. Let's start with reason number 1, disaster subculture. What does this mean? For starters, you should know that Slovenia is a small and mountainous country. Around 15% of the country is prone to flooding, and landslides are a very frequent threat. I talked to Marjan Malesic, who heads the Defense Research Center at the University of Ljubljana. He told me that the frequency of flooding helped form the disaster subculture, where people know how to behave in crises.
The subculture in terms that they know what will occur, what will be the consequences, so they can immediately switch from, let's say, normal life roles to crisis roles.
So reacting to natural emergencies is something people learn about from a young age in Slovenia, and that includes taking warnings seriously. When disaster strikes, sirens are used to alert the population. Then Slovenia's regional notification centers quickly pass information to the media about how and where people should evacuate. But this disaster subculture goes way beyond reacting in a crisis and extends to volunteering to be ready to help others when disaster hits. This takes us to reason 2, dedication of Slovenia's firefighters. They are the main responders in a crisis. Unlike many countries, they are overwhelmingly volunteers, with over 40 times as many volunteers as professionals. I spoke with Blaszka, an 18-year-old nursing student who volunteers for the firefighters and for the Red Cross. She delivered food, water and medicine to people cut off by the floods, even though it was an emotional experience.
It's not easy to see this stuff. There were a lot of people just crying, or they just in disbelief. They were like, oh, am I dreaming? This can't be happening.
She was out with a 20-kilo backpack, climbing over rocks to reach people in trouble. But she told me she feels compelled to do it because of how deeply volunteering is ingrained within her and her community.
I'm also volunteering firefighter, as are my parents and all of my family. And I just think we were all raised up in a way that if you know that someone needs help, you go and help them.
It's not just Blaszka's community. There's also a culture of volunteering for the fire service in the whole of Slovenia. Experts told me that there's a firefighting association in almost every village in the country, and every Saturday or Sunday you can see people of all ages gathering there to train. That makes for a dense network of highly motivated and well-trained people ready to save their own families, friends, and communities. Okay, so we have local firefighter associations full to bursting with volunteers all over Slovenia. We have a population that has a culture of being prepared for disaster, and we have a warning system that works. But the state also has a role to play in bringing it all together. Domen Tokar works for the state as a coordinator of Slovenia's relief efforts. He told me the government had rescue forces on standby way before the floods actually hit and could call them instantly into action. And that's what happened.
Early in the morning of the 4th of August, the national emergency plan was activated. So that means that we are all in. All the response units give a feedback, and we knew where they are all activated and where are the major troubles on the ground and the hot zones.
What's more, Domen told me that in emergencies, there's one civil commander at the national level that has ultimate power over the whole rescue operation, unlike countries with regional or federal systems. That makes distributing resources across the country very fast. So is Slovenia the perfect example of natural disaster management? Not really. Most people said it did a great job responding in this case, but response isn't everything. Let's go back to Marjan.
When it comes to prevention, it was a failure. If you cut forests excessively, there is no vegetation to contain the water when it rains.
Marjan says because too many forests were cut and badly stored timber clogged up the waterways, the rainwater pouring from storms in the mountains had nowhere else to go. So preventing flooding in the first place seems to be Slovenia's weak point. To sum it up, in an age where climate change is causing ever more extreme weather events, putting ever more lives at risk, can other countries learn something from Slovenia? Well, that depends on something that is kind of hard to copy: the dense network of volunteer firefighters and culture of volunteering. What is it like in your country? Is there a disaster subculture? And would your country be ready if a natural disaster hit? Let us know in the comments.